When people say, oh, doctors are burnt out. Yeah, guess what? I fucking get it. Me too.
Yeah.
Everyone's burnt out.
Yep.
That's a lazy excuse, man.
Yep.
Everyone is traumatized from living the way we've lived the last 5-6 years. It is not an excuse to say they are burnt out. You signed up for this.
Hi all, thanks for joining us today. We are joined today by Adam van Bavel. He is a long COVID patient activist and a healthy indoor air quality advocate. He is the founder of Maryland Indoor Air Quality Associates, and we are delighted to have him on the podcast today. Thanks for coming, Adam.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, to start with, you were affected by COVID, and you're currently a long COVID patient. Can you tell us a bit about what the original infection was like and how it's affected you since?
Yeah. So I appreciate prefacing the original infection because it's important for everyone out there listening. And I'm sure people know this to an extent. You can't get long COVID without getting COVID. COVID is the infection caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So I was pretty fortunate to not get infected for a while. When COVID started, I very vividly remember the first week of lockdowns because I was in the home building industry for many years, traveling all across the country, worked for a digital agency. And a good friend of mine and I'd helped him as like a consultant launch a business in biotech and life sciences. And after years of cajoling me and finally getting me to put in my notice, I put in 2 weeks of notice. And at the end of that time, when I started on Monday, went into our office, met the team. By Friday, stay-at-home orders went into effect. So that completely changed the trajectory, as it did for everyone, of not just my personal life, but my professional life. So I was able to go a good distance of time without having a known infection. I do also like to be very transparent. I have been vaccinated. I have had both Pfizer and Moderna, as well as Novavax, because eventually I realized that I was having issues, wanted to go a more traditional route. Now I can't get anything, so I have no immune system left, and my spike numbers are through the roof. So, and we can get into that later. But as far as my first infection, it was known August 22. So my whole family got infected at the same time. There's 4 of us, my wife, 2 little boys. I was by far the worst. It was, now when I say worst, it wasn't in the hospital. I wasn't intubated, but it was bad. I mean, there was like a good 30 to 45 days where I was having my worst case of the flu, times X.
So your acute infection was pretty severe too.
My acute was definitely the hardest illness-related health challenge that I've ever had, other than like long COVID, but like as an acute illness. So my wife, and this we'll get into later too, because it's so interesting to me and continues to be kind of like a driving question. Nothing, literally nothing. I mean, like less than a cold. My youngest son, a little bit of a response, and then my oldest son, similar to me, but nowhere near the duration. He was like maybe 4 or 5 days of like kind of rough. So in the family of 4, we had this pretty solid divergence of outcomes from the initial infection.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the rest of my family for following infections pretty much followed that same trajectory. Some different symptoms, different longevities. For the most part, theirs became a little shorter. My next known infections, and this is very unfortunate. So got my first infection August 22, fought for a long time, didn't know anywhere near what I know now. Eventually told my co-founder, which I've known for 30 years, I have to leave. And I've had a lot of hard things happen in my life, but like we were in each other's weddings. I mean, he's still right now, struggling along trying to make it with basically like 1 or 2 employees. And at the peak, we had almost 20 full-time employees at our peak.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So like a lot of that was through COVID, but it was that the secondary effects of COVID, right? It wasn't obviously people getting sick and like what we see large scale in the workforce now. It was the economy. Then it started to be the workforce layoffs. We also did staffing and recruiting in industry. So anyway, I finally told him I can't do this anymore. Like I'm not a benefit to the team and I'm killing myself. And I, like I need to be here for my family. So I thought that was the best decision I ever made. In retrospect, I was like, all right, I did the hard part. Now I got to focus on getting better. And still, I knew relatively little. Almost immediately after going out on retirement, because disability, I had a policy and they denied me, and I had to appeal it, and I got it overturned. But I didn't actually start getting disability until like February or March after going out at the end of October. So spent through all our savings. Long term, we spent through all our savings, all of our retirement, both mine and my wife's, hundreds of thousands of dollars on like keeping me alive. So that painful in its own right, traumatic in its own right, just a hellish ordeal that, while not the worst thing in the world, I wouldn't wish on others. So pretty immediately after going on disability, it's around the holidays, we're coming up on Thanksgiving. I make it through Thanksgiving, but mid-December, I get my second, COVID infection.
Oof.
And it was not good. I ended up in the ER. And then in February, 2 months after, I get another infection. So and I still don't know, but likely a separate strain. And that almost killed me. I mean, I wasn't admitted, but I was in the hospital for a little over 24 hours. I was basically just at that time, they were so overwhelmed, I was like in an ER room. And, what's really hard for me is the medical profession still not having caught up, because my blood work then is my blood work now. I've got a lot worse blood work now to add to it. But the defining things that are significant, CD8, CD4, which is same thing you see in the HIV AIDS patients, existed then. And like, no one cared. It's like, well, we can't do anything, go home and die. So that's how you feel, right? I mean, that's the reality of it. And it's when you're used to going to a hospital or an ER for a bad illness, broken something, stitches, they have the tools to fix you. You usually go home, and if you're not immediately better, you're prescribed something that will, over the course of a very short duration, make you better. And that's just what you're used to. When you go in and they tell you basically, pound sand, and there's nothing we can do, and these are doctors, it really motivates you. Well, at least me. Maybe other people would be more browbeaten, but for me, I was like, okay.
So did they just kind of like throw up their hands and say, hey, we're just literally not sure what to do about this?
Yeah. I mean, there were 1 or 2 doctors where they would say, well, some of these symptoms you're showing, maybe a rheumatologist, maybe fibromyalgia, maybe a neurologist. So on occasion you would get like, not even a referral, just like a suggestion. And then I would say, as second, third times I'm going into the ER and I know a little bit more, well, what about my monocytes? They're constantly over 10. That's not a good thing. And then they finally, when you start to have knowledge,
right,
then there's acknowledgement. And that is just, well, you're right, but we don't know what to do.
Got it.
And again, it's still happening. And while I understand you cannot become an expert overnight, and while I understand we still don't know shit about SARS, right?
Yep.
Like the original SARS, patients are still having trailing symptoms.
2 decades later. Yep.
Yeah, 40 years later after HIV,
yep,
we maybe now have finally potentially a cure, but we have like these lifestyle band-aids, which are basically maintenance drugs that you just have to take to be able to sustain this plateau. So I'm very confident, firmly confident that in all the experts I talk to and debate, that we are very much still at the infancy. We have a good understanding of the mechanisms, but we don't know the outcomes from those mechanisms and the intricacies of how they work together because it's so vast. So those were my first known infections. And obviously, I don't know if, and this is where it gets, the waters become so muddied. And I like to really take the high road and just say, the details to me are only important to an extent. I don't care about identifying when I acquired long COVID because you can have long COVID after the first infection, the second, the third. There is no test that says you have long COVID.
Right.
So when people are like, when did you get it? Honestly, I feel like shit after the first infection. So that was probably just long COVID because technically, the long COVID definition is having those, symptoms for a chronic period of time of whatever the technical time period is, which I definitely qualified for after my first infection.
Yeah.
Was it as disabling as the long COVID I live with today? Absolutely not. I have steadily declined over years despite ramping up my efforts over years, which is not that access is not a fun place to live. But there's too many people out there concerned about, is it from the virus? Is it from the vaccine? When did you get long COVID? I don't fucking care. I want to get better so that then and help prevent other people from experiencing this. Then we can worry about those details. Until we have better treatments, until we have a cure, that shit is like so secondary. And it's a waste of time, frankly.
Yep. Well, and the thing is too, I mean, we don't have identifying biomarkers, right? And there are many people when we have these conversations where realistically long COVID is still COVID. It's just out of the acute phase, right? And so to the extent that we've newly defined long COVID as some sort of without knowing or without having these biomarkers to identify it technically people who have had COVID who have recovered or seem to have recovered. There's a lot of conversation around viral persistence. There's a lot of conversation around being unable to clear it entirely from your body, and we just don't know. Like you said, right? We just literally don't know. And so I mean, I think that there's, to the extent that we've defined the 200 symptoms or so that we're talking about with respect to long COVID, it could be that there's 300. We just literally don't know.
Exactly. And I think that really leads to, I have a background where I'm very persistent, I'm very resilient, and I've always found a way to get things done. And that's like people like to say like, oh, it's like a startup mentality or just get shit done. And the reality is I have always operated like just building the plane as I'm trying to fly it. And when I first got sick, one of the first things that I started doing was I compiled this document. And the document for me served multiple purposes. One, it was a reference because I had so much occurring. I needed to consolidate it in a central location so I didn't lose my mind, so I knew where to look. Two, it was a validation tool. When I started to get gaslit and felt like I was losing my mind, I could, remind myself, no, you just don't know shit. This is what it is. And when you confront people with that, then they suddenly become very quiet. When I go to see a rheumatologist and they say my immune system's fine, I break out my document with over 50 biomarkers that say the opposite. Just because you don't understand this does not mean that I'm okay. That just means you don't understand it.
Right.
And I've never had anyone be able to overcome that. So that was, if people aren't documenting their experience, you should. If nothing else for your own mental sanity, because you will be gaslit. And I'm sure most of the people listening to this have been pretty extensively. Another tool that it was really useful for was disability. So if you apply for disability, which likely you would because you have chronic illness and you need a way to pay for life, it's again a good reference. It's a document, right? It's something you can point to that shows your experience. But getting back to the biomarkers, while there isn't an identifying biomarker for long COVID, you can very easily start to accumulate things like and identify MCH and MCV, low ferritin, high iron. That's iron dysfunction. That's a hallmark. High monocytes, and humoral immune response. And we know that that's where there's a lot of viral persistence and replications, particularly with me. So as you start to arm yourself with that knowledge, it's like, okay, and that's really what long COVID is at this point anyway, is it's by ruling everything else out. It's like, well, you don't have fibromyalgia, you don't have ME/CFS, you don't have this, that, the other. It's got to be long COVID because you have all these things and it's not these other things. So that is, I think, important, because whether or not your own doctor recognizes this, I'm fortunate. My primary care is, this, like, I'm like so grateful because there's so many people out there that their doctors just, I feel very strongly it's malpractice. Like, you have a code of ethics.
Yep.
And I know you've seen some of my posts online, but I made another post on LinkedIn the other day. And I don't want to be controversial for the sake of causing controversy. I want to be controversial because I believe I'm right.
Right.
And I want other people to either, battle me on that and just say, okay, agree to disagree, or hopefully walk away with a different perspective.
Yep.
And in my opinion, if you're a podiatrists deal with inflammation, joint pain. Okay, what does SARS do? Creates an immense amount of inflammation. One of the first things I realized was I was having issues with my pre-existing arthritis. I was having all of these arthritic issues, and they were starting to just like explode. My rheumatologist, no one knew, but I started connecting these dots. I started looking at my blood work. The rheumatologist's like, you're fine. I'm like, no, my CRP and all these other different blood measurements. Look at this. And I would connect them and say, well, yeah, I guess. And
I guess.
Yeah, like,
Wow.
not everyone has a doctor that is going to, and I'm really grateful for that, but it physically hurts me because there's so many people out there suffering because they don't have a doctor.
Sure.
It will you don't need to understand. You just need to listen to your patient. And if your patient brings, and I'm so lucky, because I bring my doctor, hey, look, have you heard of peptides seem to be helping some people? Have you heard of off-label medications like metformin and low-dose naltrexone and low-dose lithium? And he's like, no. And I show him papers, peer-reviewed papers, say, okay, I'll prescribe that for you. Why? Because he's a fucking doctor with a heart. Because he thinks. Because he's listening to the patient experience. And that is invaluable, because I would not be where I am right now if I didn't have that primary care doctor who was, just willing to listen and willing to take the time to do his due diligence, to do the job that he signed up for. And when people say, oh, well, doctors are burnt out. Yeah, guess what? I fucking get it. Me too.
Yeah.
Everyone's burnt out.
Yep.
That's a lazy excuse, man. Yep. Everyone is traumatized from living the way we've lived the last 5-6 years. It is not an excuse to say they're burnt out. You signed up for this. You've got to find a way to either make it work and help your patients, or find another job.
Yeah,
exactly. They signed up for this. This is their job, right?
Literally their job. Yeah.
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 Adam, I'm curious, did you, is the doctor that you have now the one that you had before you first got infected? Did you have to find a different doctor?
It is. And so you just made me think of a really good thing. Relationships in life are everything. They're everything. Like, my entire existence, I've never applied for a job. Had like 1 million jobs, never applied for a job. It's just because I'm outgoing. I give a shit about people. I listen to what people care about, want, need. I try to connect them. Like, the reason I think, at least with me, because I'm assuming he's like that with other patients, but I guarantee you it's also probably because other patients aren't as persistent as I am and don't have the relationship with him that I do. I built that from like the time I was 18. I would go in and genuinely in our, meetings, ask about his family, tell him about mine. It wasn't just like a medical experience. So for people listening too, I think that holds a very integral value to any, relationship, but particularly your doctors. If your doctor genuinely cares about you, and this isn't like a do something with the expectation of getting it back, but if you are genuinely asking about their family, about you can tell their story, right? I just said doctors don't have an easy job. Not saying it's easy, but like I'm sometimes like I can tell you're having a bad day, and like one of one of my doctors who's on my team, I knew from 2 appointments ago that something was going on from something that was conveyed through an assistant. I didn't know what, but I asked on a follow up, and it like gave him pause because like I care, and I don't do that with the expectation of I do that because I care. But guess what? I guarantee you, he's giving me more time and caring back equally, because that's what humans should do. And we've lost a lot of that. And unfortunately, the way that this virus operates is it creates apathy, driven people out there just head down in avoidance. But we need to retain that. And relationships are a key way. And by doing that with your doctor, you will find better outcomes than you're currently finding now if you start to focus more on that.
That's a really smart insight. Thanks for that, Adam. I'm curious how many other specialists you've had to go see.
I don't know, over 10. I mean, I've several cardiologists, neurologists, pulmonologists, rheumatologists, PCP, physical therapist, DO, dysautonomia specialist who runs like one of the most well-known clinics in the country, 3 long COVID clinics I've been a part of, internal medicine, immunologist.
There's a lot. Damn.
Yeah.
Have they all seemed quite as ignorant of the actual science across the board? Like, have you run into anybody who seems particularly well versed in the types of things that we're well versed in because we just, read all these studies and in your case, obviously, are going through it?
Unless you have long COVID somewhere in your marketing or email signature, or maybe I'll say dysautonomia, because that's such a big feature within the umbrella of long COVID. Those are the only 2 doctors, one of my long COVID doctors and a dysautonomia doctor. And the dysautonomia has existed for obviously very, 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 I mean, it's always existed, but it's been known and treated significantly for decades, but it really just started to blow up, particularly because of POTS. I have had, this is a fucking wild, like one of my pulmonologist doctors openly, and this is like, we were talking about this earlier and we can talk about it again, openly sharing 2 young children, college athletes, no longer can play sports because of POTS.
Right.
Acknowledged POTS is an epidemic now. Not wearing a mask, just treating people, talking to me, seeing how it impacts me. And I am seeing more and more doctors, nurses, techs, because I'm in your face about it. I go in, I've got my mask on, I've got my air purifier. People are like, what's that, a speaker? I'm like, no, it's an air purifier.
Right.
Oh, okay. They're like, this guy's crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I have long COVID. And then I show them my like 25 plus page document with all the things that are wrong with me. How when they look at it, if they know anything about blood work, they're like, why are you on 2 AIDS antivirals? I don't know. Why am I?
Yeah.
What stops people in their tracks? And at that point, the stories start to come out. My daughter has, a pulmonary embolism from long COVID. My nephew is suffering from long COVID and having neuropathy, and it's like, it's becoming more prevalent. And the thing that I'm harping on recently is disability, which the numbers are skyrocketing and it's out there. And I share that with everyone because the only driver of that is long COVID. I mean, did disability exist prior? Of course, but it's a very clear explosion right after the pandemic. And there's a lot of people that try to argue with me, oh, it's a vaccine and, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, again, It's probably both, because I'm not like, yes, there are people who get vaccine injury,
Vax injury.
and that exists. But people also say, oh, it can't be COVID or long COVID. And I'm like, you don't understand. They're saying that can't, because look, it happened right when COVID happened. I'm like, that's when it starts to take off. Disability is chronic illness. Chronic illness takes time. It
Right.
took me 9 months. It could take someone else 3 years. It could take someone else 1 month. Like,
And that's also to get through the disability system too, right? So you
exactly.
got to get,
And to get recorded as
Yeah.
that number with the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. That's a great
Exactly.
point.
Yep.
So, I mean, it just, there's such short-sightedness. And then again, I
Yep.
think that goes back to what I always harp on of trauma and denial. It's like people just want to push out excuses why it's not. I'm like, why don't you start realizing why it is
Totally.
and trying to create solutions instead of excuses?
Yep. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing from my perspective. So, like, I'm someone who looks at things holistically. So, starting to look at COVID, I was looking at tons of research. It's now, the most well-researched virus in the history of humanity. So, and there's so much irrefutable evidence, and you can take all the RCTs you want, and you can point out all the different caveats to each one, which is a valid. Certain ones are valid, but the holistic library of data is indisputable from my perspective. But that's just the science data, and then you look at things like disability data. You look at things like correlations to your immune system dysregulation and other diseases that were being predicted to exponentially explode if you got COVID this many times, etc. And so there's this. If you look at things holistically, it's so glaringly obvious, and I think it's weird that there's such myopia, like you were saying, that they can't see any of this. It's like they're focused on. I don't even understand. So I don't understand it. I know most of us don't, but it's just a really strange.
Or it comes down to living in an alternate universe.
It does, yeah.
What you just said is there are facts, and it's not like we're looking at one set of facts. There's many sets of facts that all support the same thing.
Globally.
You're right. The UK disability, just saying disability, just like ours, a little bit worse actually. And maybe we're even because we don't report things in the US anymore. Right. But these things are so blatantly obvious. And to me, I mean, there are many issues in life that when people have blinders on, this is what occurs. And it is very clear that the blinders are on. And how do we get people to, that don't look up, right? Like, how do we get people to acknowledge this? And sadly, this is the reality of it is, someone said this the other day on X, and it's so painful because you see this happening. So in the long COVID community, I'm living it. Like my wife and I, very challenging relationship right now. Lots of divorce, lots of people just leaving each other. If you're lucky, how fucked up is this? If you're lucky, you and your partner have long COVID and you're both like in this same, or you have a spouse who doesn't and is totally on board with you. But we have people that are homeless now because their spouse leaves them. They are unable to get disability. They've spent through all their savings in retirement. They have nowhere to live. They have no way to pay for their medication. They're living in a fucking tent with chronic illness being discarded. Like trash.
Yep.
Like,
it's
I
horrific.
don't know. I mean, I'm a very sensitive person. I'm very empathetic, but like how someone that's dead inside, how can you know that and not want to fix it?
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's like we as a society are just going further down the rabbit hole of every man for himself, in this like weird, and that's, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff tied to this, right, which we talked about a little bit before, which is, the wealth gap, the haves and the have-nots, the gap is so much bigger than it was, and COVID very much exposed it and exacerbated it, right? And so I think that it is brutal, and there's also this duality from my perspective at play where you're just talking about like being dead inside and not, how can you look at somebody who's going through this and not try to figure it out, right? Help do something to try to figure out this, to literally do something. And then there's a duality to that, like I was saying, where it's also taking a personal emotional toll on what you have to deal with in your own life, right? And that's where we're sort of like, you've gone through this, all of us in this community go through this, where we have to be more protective of ourselves because we are being gaslit. I mean, there's this huge concerted effort to minimize everything, to really really force every single person to make these really shitty, difficult decisions that impact, familial relationships, partnership relationships, like you were just talking about. And because we really are living in well, one of us is living in reality, and the other is living in some sort of like subjective normal that they are, beholden to, which doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist.
And what society needs to reckon with is you're okay until you're not. Like I was, in a very comfortable place with my life's trajectory, you know, going far better than as I was growing up could have ever imagined. And just like that. So you can think you're well off, and even if something happens, I'll be able to weather it. You're going to learn real quick that that's not the case. And that's the sad reality, is that until you have this lived experience, not that many people are empathetic enough,
Yeah.
or, have the EQ to be able to live in a way before they're actually impacted by it.
Yep.
And that is the biggest tragedy that we're experiencing through this. Is I would say for every 100 advocates, maybe 5, maybe aren't living with long COVID. Maybe.
Yeah. Adam, I'm curious, and I know this might be a bit exhausting, but can you describe a bit about what you're dealing with long COVID right now?
So recently it's been getting worse. I just went yesterday to get a CAT scan with contrast, and that was in itself an ordeal because of issues that, if you haven't noticed, in every aspect of life, there are more issues recently. Mail going to wrong houses, delivery to wrong houses, you know, issues, whether they're done by automation from someone programming them wrong or human error. But this is playing out in real time. But anyway, went to get a CAT scan. I'll get the results from that soon, because I've got, I think everyone can envision in their head like the Halloween cartoon Frankenstein with the bolts in his neck. And I feel like I have a bolt in my left side just getting torqued and ratcheted around and hit
Oh
with
my
a
God.
fucking sledgehammer. And it's been getting worse. And I've had an x-ray and an ultrasound. So I did some research, and I reached out to my doctor and I said, well, this sounds and feels like it could be a deep neck abscess. Let's get a CAT scan and either address it or rule it out. So I've got that. I have, from neuropathy, and this is constant, stabbing pains in my groin, in my legs every day when I wake up. And sometimes they wake me up in my sleep. Not like restless leg. Like if you've experienced restless leg syndrome, like take restless leg and put your legs in a burning pit of glass and run over it with a steamroller.
Oh
Like
my gosh.
that type feeling. And you just exist with that. So, and again, like I don't know that anyone else, I know there's people who have similar things, but like this is my individual experience. There's so many symptoms and how they play out with people. I have terrible headaches, times where vision issues. I've had a stroke. Um, I've had times where I thought I was dying. Now, when I have that happen, I just know that that's just what I have to live with. Or like my heart has actually stopped. My non-aerobic heart rate's gone over 200 beats per minute.
Oof.
My memory, I'm okay still. Like neurologically, some people, lots of different challenges. My conversational, and especially when I do things like this, like I'm passionate. This is like a spike of adrenaline, because this is also like free therapy. But my memory is very bad, especially short term. let's see, what other things do I have that are fun? All of my joint pain. So there's muscular, there's nerve, and there's joint. So several different types of pain. But it's constant. And it's like, I have complex sleep apnea from this, where like it's not from my weight or anything. It's not from my anatomy. It's just now neurologically, I have autonomic nervous dysfunction that like that's when my heart's stopped, and that's when my lungs have not, they just stopped breathing. And I shoot up and I think I'm fucking dying, and the room is spinning and blinking, and I feel like I'm out of my body because like I haven't been breathing.
That's
Not sustainable, clearly. If we don't like, I'm 46. My body's living like this for years. There's people now dying from long COVID, whether or not by suicide because they can no longer deal with this, which is very real. And we've lost a lot of people recently from that. Or from it just grinding them down. Like I go to bed frequently and think to myself, well, the way I'm feeling right now, am I going to just die and never wake up? That's every day.
that sucks, man. That is brutal.
God,
and I
is
actually
so
I want to
hard.
point something out, Adam. You, if we were just on a Zoom call like this, and you didn't tell us this type of stuff, you looks like you're fine, right? And I think that's where long COVID really, people either start accepting that lower baseline, and they shouldn't have to. But then you have other people who are like, long COVID's not that bad. Look, he's up, he's talking, and they have no idea the depth of shit that you're dealing with, and the profound impact on you and the rest of your life, your family, your children, your, everybody. And I think that's one of the things that it really aggravates me. It's because they're just, I mean,
If it
people
was
just can't.
visible, that people
Yeah.
would be taking it more
Right.
seriously.
It's not
Yeah.
like it's a disability when you have this chronic illness, but it's not like most people think of you, because most people don't have chronic illness.
Hmm.
And I don't think there's any fault in this. It's just that there hasn't been good enough public health education around it. Most people have, disability is handicapped, like a visible,
Right.
like, oh, that person's in a wheelchair.
Right.
Right. They need
Yep.
to use a wheelchair ramp because they're disabled.
Yep.
They have a handicap.
Right.
They don't think of it in chronic illness. And to your point, and not to go down like conspiracy theory rabbit hole, but I do find it weird that now I'm in a trial for a GLP-1, and we now have all of these different peptides and GLP-1 weight loss things, when guess what happens to be coinciding with that? There are people like me that before this, I've lost 50 pounds. People are like, you look great. I'm like, it's not fucking intentional. It's because I'm withering away. So there are people, if you look around, there are people that either like have COVID face and are gaunt, or there are people that have gained weight because of the mechanisms of what COVID does. There's a lot of type 2 diabetics now from COVID. So I think it's odd that now we have these drugs coming out almost to mask this issue and to potentially treat it. But to me, that's like a very strange scenario that now I'm entering to take away, and I'm on metformin too, which is a diabetic drug, off label for an antiviral. It's a very low dose, so it doesn't have too much impact on the weight that I've lost. But it is really tough when even your closest friends and family, oh, you look great. And I always like to say, because I love being blunt. Well, I feel like shit. I feel like I'm dying.
Right.
So, not to be pessimistic, not to be a downer.
That's just the reality.
Right. And I don't like to talk to people that much anymore because nothing I have to share is uplifting.
Right.
And in the same token, people should hear that because they should be acting on it. And I used to feel guilty about it. And now I'm just like, I'm pick and choose when I share this information. I find ways to pepper it in. And, one of those ways is like indoor air quality, and particularly my friends that have kids in school, because I try to educate and I try to not be a downer, but I try to also be relevant in a way that people can understand and call things out. because I mean, you both know this, Public Health Action Network, you're like utilizing stories to create action or engagement even before action. But the end result is outcomes. And telling stories, when I can share with people, I got long COVID. And then when I learned how and what was driving a lot of community transmission, and I went to try to stop my kids from getting long COVID, now my fucking kids have long COVID because the school wasn't doing a fucking thing. And I've been fighting tooth and nail in this condition. Like, there's that great speech Larry Kramer did where he's losing his mind, rightfully so, because why is it that the dying are the ones that have to advocate and be the activists at such, a cost to their own health?
Yep. Another similarity
So,
with HIV, AIDS.
Yeah, and I mean just in our health, and I mean like I like to say I try to merge my kind of devotion for this work of like Larry Kramer's passion and Aaron Brockovich, like with like I try to like hybrid those two, and I'll be lucky if I'm able to facilitate like a fraction of the outcomes, but I'm not going to stop. And I like, that's one of my, everyone should have something that they really appreciate about themselves. And my favorite thing about me is that I am persistent. And my wife, she's on the PTA, and like the people at school, they joke. And now she's like, you're not going to win. Like, he's going to wear you down. He won't stop.
Good.
Yeah. So whether or not we get divorced or what, but like, I will not stop until I'm either dead or I've protected my children and their classmates.
Right.
That's
Well, that's a good segue about your work with Maryland schools, with Maryland Indoor Air Quality Advocates. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with that and where you're hoping to go with that?
Yeah. So when I got sick, I realized that 70% of community transmission occurs from kids in school. Most kids are in public school. So I'm like, okay, where is the place I can focus? My kids are in public school. Where can I focus my efforts to try to make real change? Because if we were to change those numbers by 20%, that's huge. But I feel like we could change them by 40+%. So I started thinking, okay, I'm going to start my kids' school. And that became them denying me at every turn. Why? I don't know. They won't accept HEPA. I have almost $400 units sitting in boxes, brand new, that they won't accept. So then I went to the district. The district says no. They just turn everything away. So then I met a bunch of people in the indoor air quality space. Tony Culinary, who's well known, works for Medify. He's on one of the committees, I believe, for ASHRAE. So if you're not familiar with ASHRAE, check out ashrae.org. ASHRAE is the organization that schools are supposed to adhere to for HVAC, indoor air quality best practices. But anyway, he shared a great nugget, and he said, right now you're just an angry parent, but if you started an organization, then you could gather individuals and have a larger advocacy engagement. So I started Maryland Indoor Air Quality Advocates for better indoor air quality in all public spaces, but particularly focused on public schools. And what we're trying to do right now, we've identified several issues. One, Maryland has a law that hasn't ever been adhered to, and we're trying to get lawyers. So I pray that lawyers start to pay attention, and I'm waiting for the day that one reaches out to me because I'm doing a lot of outreach. And unfortunately, one thing that should be noted, so at least, every school district's different, but there are thresholds to which you can basically sue a school, both by individual and by incident. And in the world of lawyers and money, it's not a high number. So we needed a lawyer who's in it for their legacy. We need a lawyer who's in this because they're about civil rights, and they won't stand for this shit either. We need a lawyer who's not in this for the paycheck. But we've found No Maryland schools. They're supposed to be every 4 years. Every classroom in the state is supposed to have their CO2 readings as part of this assessment. It's never been done. Montgomery County Public Schools is an anomaly in that they are not adhering to the law because they choose to. They took ESSER funds from the pandemic when they first came out early on and applied them and created a great thing, very progressive, an indoor air quality program. So they have 10,000 units, monitors in every classroom in that district. Now, I'll also tell you the reason that happened, and no one will probably ever admit to this. My prior business worked in life sciences. The majority of life sciences is in and around DC in the Beltway, Rockville, FDA, NIH, CDC. It all happens right there. There's a lot of money, a lot of science right there, a lot of policy right there. Well, what happens with those kids' schools if they don't go to public school or private school? You go to public school. So you have a lot of affluent decision-making power in that district. And I guarantee you there was a lot of direction for this to occur because look what happened with Walensky and Ashish Jha's school district up in Boston. They were quick to implement these exact things. So anyway, we know that law is not being adhered to. So we're trying to force action there at a large scale. I am now trying to force action for these 2+ years that I've been trying to get HEPA units in my children's classroom. They went from healthy to unhealthy, long COVID diagnosis with ADHD and asthma, which is in my mind, not really ADHD and asthma. It's literally a byproduct because those are things that can come from SARS infections.
Right.
So now we have that I was trying to prevent, and they were behind on their indoor environmental quality assessment. They hadn't done one since December last year, and I was grilling them. Well, lo and behold, yesterday I got the report, and they literally are so fucking stupid. They sent me a report where it says in my children's classrooms, there is mold in the HVAC and in the filters. So I have that now. I have that. I've, downloaded it. I've sent them an email back with like our county executive, and I'm going after them. I am going to sue them until this gets changed. I mean, I will not give up. So we're trying two different approaches. One, suing because we want to force action. And then the other side is what you're trying to do, education. I feel like if more parents understood, this isn't just viral respiratory issues, it's asthma. Mold is an allergen that can trigger that. There's particulate matter. There's, microplastics now. There's VOCs. We have all these things in the air that our children and teachers are breathing every day. And we have issues with absence. We have issues with test scores. We have issues with violence. All of these things tie back to neurological issues, which are directly impacted by having dirty air. So again, just like our bigger problem with long COVID, it couldn't be more in your face. The data's there. People are living in a bizarro world. And if more people knew, they could force their school district to take action. Now, this is a much more palatable response than COVID, long COVID, which no one wants to deal with. So everyone out there watching, if you want to try to create change, jump on the indoor air quality bandwagon because people are willing to talk about that. People care about their kids. You don't ever have to mention COVID, but if we can make impact in indoor air quality, you get a byproduct of benefiting your children's health and better mitigating long COVID.
Yep.
Right. Plus just all the other airborne, shit going around. Just all the colds, all the RSV, all the flu.
Much. Every year, 3 years ago, right? We had flu. Then it was flu and COVID. Then it was flu and COVID and RSV. And then it was mycoplasma. Yep. Right now in the UK, they've got the quaddemic. We're going to have like the fucking septemic soon. It's like, when does it end?
Yeah. And Tokyo just instituted some sort of lockdown or...
yes.
Yeah, they have.
Because flu is so bad in Tokyo now.
So rampant, yep.
The H3N2, I mean, it's like everything is mutating more because it has more capability to. Our immune systems aren't as capable at fighting off what once existed. Immunity dead is bullshit. My memory T cells and B cells, they're non-existent. Yep. I don't have a way to fight things off. I just shared something online my B cells are non-existent. That's one subset I had done of a bunch of things. But like, if you look at me on paper, like you could have a tissue and just flick it, and that's my immune system. Like, it's just going to shatter and go right through it. And that's what we have going on, is we have all these people walking around because you can't feel blood vessel damage until you can. You
Right.
can't feel
Yep.
cellular damage until you can. So people think,
Exactly.
I'm okay.
Yep.
You're not okay. We're all walking around with the same thing occurring.
Yep.
There is no science that proves that SARS impacts me significantly differently than someone else. There's mild science saying certain genes maybe prevent certain outcomes, but like, there's nothing concrete. So I'm going to go with the fact that everything single person is similarly susceptible, and with repeat infections over time, eventually everyone looks similar.
Which, oh, by the way, I believe there's a term for, maybe the precautionary principle.
Yeah. None of this is groundbreaking.
No, it's not.
Acknowledge it.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, this is you've got a tough fight, and you're dealing with so many issues. I really applaud you for trying to make some change and some progress with all the conditions you're dealing with. So if folks want to find out more about Maryland Indoor Air Quality Advocates, where's the best place to find out?
So 2 places right now. We have not everyone obviously utilizes social media. So with my lack of time and resources, so we do have a couple volunteers. That's more to show up for things and as like advisors. So we have a Facebook group, and then we have a LinkedIn page. Now, if you're on LinkedIn, I'd really appreciate joining there, because again, in my mind, where we can make the most impact is with leaders. A lot of people in local government are on LinkedIn. You can shame them. Like, I'm all about shaming people publicly.
Yeah.
And if I die before the change that I want occurs, I will haunt people because of all the things that I have online. Well,
Do you have set scheduled posts that go out?
Exactly. I should have like one of those kill switches that just indefinitely posts. But those are the 2 places that you can,
Okay, great.
or obviously reach out to me personally. I'm everywhere, on social media. It's just Adam van Bavel. My last name, very unique. You can do IAQ4, the number 4, schools @gmail.com. That's the email you can use to reach out to. But we need help.
I'll go ahead and add all of those to the show notes when we
Thank
publish
you.
this.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it, and I encourage anyone watching to getting involved and making a difference. Doesn't have to be being a maniac like me. It can be as simple as, hey, I can email one representative, or I can make a phone call, or even I have a caretaker who can do a little more. Like, you've got to be creative, right? Like, change does not happen overnight. So if you're willing,
and it's not always a straight line from like here to there, right?
Yep.
Right. You just got to be willing. So please reach out to me, and I'll find a way to plug you in if you're interested.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Adam. It's great to hear from you. It's certainly instructive hearing about all the different issues that are dealing with long COVID. And like Tars was saying, just the fact that all of this is invisible just makes it so much harder for folks to understand. So hopefully this will be a small drop towards helping people understand more what it's like.
Yeah, we're talking about that long COVID monument memorial. So any ways that we can make this a visual, visuals are powerful. So exactly.
Agreed. Yep.
Yes, they are. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Adam. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.